Good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to the Charlie Mike Webinar Series 22, hosted by the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to thank BAE Systems and Philips North America for sponsoring this webinar series. Just one announcement today. We're less than 2 weeks away from our annual event down in Orlando, Florida, MIKE'22, which is May 17th through the 20th. At the DoubleTree Hotel in Orlando, Florida. The hotel block will run out on May 8th, and we got a great lineup of speakers ready for you to enjoy. So please come out and visit us down in Orlando, Florida. We have a good number of government agencies and large businesses, prime contractors will be at the conference this year. So if you follow us on LinkedIn, we have a list of all the government agencies and prime contractors that will be there at the event. So please come out and join us for MIKE'22. Okay, today's webinar, it's an hour and 15 minutes, and this webinar is being recorded. We will send all this recording and the slides to all attendees by Friday. If you have any questions, please type it on the right hand of your screen on the control panel. And I'm back. My name is Earl Morgan. I am the program director for the NVSBC. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. And with us is a special guest and our major supporter of the NVSBC. His name is Phil Panzarella. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Panzarella in Consulting. And Phil, thank you for joining us. And I am going to pass this over to you. So give me a second here.
Okay. We okay? Ready to go, Earl?
Yeah, this is all yours.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Earl. I really do appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I am delighted to be here with you all. And the NVSBC invited me to speak. And I said, well, you know, are there any key topics? And they said, well, think of some things that you think might be pertinent to growing organizations. And I thought through my 41 years of experience that it might be very beneficial to talk to you a little bit about some of the leadership lessons that I learned. And then really how ethics ties into that, because it does matter to your business and your personal life. And I think they are intrinsically tied. And based upon some of the things that are going on in our environment today, I think it's a very timely topic. So stay with me. We have about an hour to go through this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I think that's where we get the most learning, is by asking questions. So if you have a question, please. Feel free to ask. And again, I want to thank BAE Systems and Philips for being the sponsor of this great event. So agenda. So let me just tell you about what I plan to cover for today, just to give you an idea. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I'm here, who I am. And there's a video in here that'll kind of explain why I put that into this presentation. And that'll be later on in this presentation itself. And we'll talk a little bit about what does it mean to lead? And then there's some common terminology that I think are very important to go through. So there's just a few terms I'd like to get out of the way, and then we'll talk about, is there a difference between leadership and management, and what are the various leadership styles, and what's your style? Because you all have one. And I think, you know, it does matter, and it matters to the type of culture that you build in your organization. We'll talk about the 12 leadership tenets that I walked away with after running my company after 12 years and having a successful exit. I tried to sit down and think about, I came up with probably about a list of 30 things that I thought were very important from a leadership perspective, but I tried to boil it down to about 12 items for this presentation so we can talk through some of those things. And then we'll talk about ethics. You know, given where we are, like I said, in today's environment and the many challenges, you know, I am very fortunate that with a bunch of volunteers, we've been running a leadership and ethics conference for high school juniors with all the different academies and ROTC programs, and we've been educating them on the importance of ethics and how it's fundamental to your overall leadership styles, and so it's a very beneficial program. We've been doing that for 15 years, and I'm really excited about talking to you all about ethics, and more importantly, how do you view ethics, and how do you identify when the ethical climate is starting to fade? And we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about what do you do about it and how do you manage it. And at the end, I have a bunch of citations because it's like a bibliography of all the different things and citations that I use in the books. And then I have a one chart on different leadership books that I think are relevant to the topic. Open it up to Q&A, and then I have a challenge for you all at the end of the presentation that hopefully you'll take me up on. So why am I here? You know, I will tell you that after I sold my company, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the next chapter of my life. And I thought, you know, how can I give back? How can I do more? And how can I commit with, you know, to you and individuals, you know, to deliver my services and empower people to be the best they can be in mind, body, and spirit, not only through leadership coaching, but through mentoring, consulting, and volunteering my time. My personal goal is to be the best possible version of myself. I don't try to be anybody else. I try to do the best things I can. I try to leverage the God-given gifts that I have to the best of my ability to be able to help others. And hence the Albert Einstein quote about the highest destiny of an individual is to serve. So that's kind of why I'm here. I don't have a biography, but I thought a picture paints 1,000 words. I'm going to throw that up there and see if that resonates with you all. But it's everything from my childhood to my volunteer time to my business, my family, the center of my life, which is in the center of this slide, my volunteer activity on the right-hand side with Easter Seals, NDSBC, Wounded Warrior, a Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, et cetera. So that photo, I think, paints a very solid picture of Phil Panzarella and who I am and why I'm delighted to be here with you all today. So again, you've got the plan, you've got who I am, you got why I'm here. So now let's talk about leadership. What does it mean to lead, right? You know, I know you all are leaders, and leaders can be in various parts of your organization. You don't have to be the CEO to be a leader, as you all well know, right? So how do you determine what leadership is, and how do you leverage the skills, and what are the important skills of leadership? And can individual contributors be leaders? And is leadership something that's learned, or is it something that's innate and people are born with? And the answer is probably yes, yes, and yes, right? It's probably a combination of all those things, and it's something that, in fact, can be learned. And I think that's what our job is as leaders, is to really teach people how to lead. And I know there's 1,000 books out there on leadership, and you can probably pick any one of your own. And matter of fact, if you have some interesting books, put it in the chat room so we can all share from that, because I think it would be very beneficial for all of us to be able to share those ideas. So what is the terminology that I would want to go through with you? Let's just take a couple key topics in terms. You know, one fundamental thing to leadership is character, as you will all know. You know, and what is character? Well, you know, it's a combination of a bunch of different qualities that distinguish individuals, and it really has a lot to do with virtues. And I listed a bunch of virtues there. I don't know which ones resonate for you, but for me, it's service, responsibility, courage, humility, you know, and compassion. And I think those are all important. You know, just because you're a leader doesn't mean you can't empathize and you can't have compassion and you can't deal with emotions. So character is a really important trait. And what I often ask everyone is, what do you think your character traits are? Which ones are important to you? Which ones make you who you are today? And then you talk about trust. I had the honor of working with Stephen Covey Jr. in his book of Speed of Trust, and we put a program on with him as the keynote speaker. And he often talks about trust as placing your confidence and reliance on the character and competence of other people and organizations and institutions, right? So the tree on the right is something that he presents in his presentation. And the foundation of that tree is character. And the top of it is competence. It's the branches that spread out from the character, right? And the character, as you can see from this slide, is built around really integrity. And the competence is built around what is your intent, what are your capabilities, and what are the results that you achieve as a result of implementing it. So it's about character, competence, and I also think compassion. So there's a few terms, and again, you could probably find other definitions for these. These are the ones that Phil Panzarella decided to go with today, and I think we could probably change them a little bit here and there, but I think we got the gist of what they are. These two terms, I think, are pretty important. I think culture comes up all the time today. what is the culture of your organization? How do you measure the culture of one's organization? And I'd venture to say that, for me personally, when I ran my company, culture was about making people feel safe, feel like they belong, and feel like they were treated fairly in an organization that respected what they brought to the table. So to me, it's about your attitudes, your values, and your goals and your practices. And it all starts from leadership. And I often talk about, we'll talk about some of these points about leadership, but the one fundamental one for me is leading by example, right? And that really drives culture. When your leadership team leads by example, drives the culture, drives the attitudes and practices that you want to implement in the organization, then I think you're going to drive the right cultures in the organization. And you can put whatever title you want on these types of cultural things that are going on in today's world, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion. I think it really stems from how do you create the right attitude, the right practices to make people feel safe. And I do make a distinction between culture and climate. A climate is really a reflection of how people think and feel right now in your organization, not over time, not over a long period. So when you go measure your climate, because that impacts the overall culture within your organization. And the one other thing that comes to mind for me from a psychology perspective, I don't know if you all remember Maslow's hierarchy, right? But people want to feel like, first of all, the first and foremost, he had 5 levels, but the first and foremost was the psychological needs. People want to know that they've got food, they got shelter. Then it was around safety. Then it was around love and belonging, and a sense of connection. And so a lot of the organizations that we're in today is, how do you build that sense of connection? That's one of the things I love about the NDSBC is that we're veterans and there's a sense of connection. There's a connective tissue there that resonates with each of us that bring us all together and create that level of trust. Then after that, you have esteem, which comes to respect, treating people, recognizing them, giving them the freedom to act. And then ultimately is the top level is the self-actualization, to be the best you can be, to make the most out of people's God-given skills. So those are just a couple terms on the front end. And then we talk about fairness, inclusive, and ethics. Fairness, has a lot of different definitions, but to me, it's how do you treat people in an equitable way? And sometimes you can be preferential, in my opinion, but it can't be for arbitrary reasons, right? So you got to be able to really substantiate in your own mind, what are those reasons that you would not treat somebody as fairly or as equally as somebody else. But there are times when exceptions are going to have to be made, and you never know what they are until they appear in your face. And then, so give that some thought about what some of those situations are that you could, do things maybe a little bit differently than what you thought, and where are your bounds. Inclusive is exactly what it is. Everyone gets included in the organization. Everyone, regardless of the differences, everybody brings a skill. And I think it's our jobs as leaders to figure out how to leverage that skill and bring it out in each and every one of our employees. And that's our responsibility. Ethics, we're going to have a section towards the end on ethics. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on ethics, but like I said, there are a lot of challenges in the world around us, and a lot of them stem from an ethical background. And again, to me, it's a matter of, what are the standards of right and wrong that you prescribe, or what humans ought to do, the rights, beliefs, the obligations to society, the obligations you have in your own organization, right? What are that level of ethics that you expect? Because I will tell you that I remember one time we put a bid in, and the contracting shop sent us back somebody else's pricing data in the middle of an RFP. And our team questioned what to do with it. And as the leadership team, we knew exactly what we needed to do with it. We returned it and we removed our bid as a result of, whether this was the right thing to do or not, I don't know. But we removed our bid as a result of my team finding out all the pricing information for a competitor. So, the ethical scenarios do pop up, and you have to be prepared as a leadership team to be able to address them. What does it mean to lead? Leadership is not easy. Leadership is a journey. It's a process. It's about how do you influence people. It's not leadership by power or by position. It's about how do you influence others, and how do you do it in an ethical application towards a positive goal or accomplishment of a positive mission. And to me, you know, the Army often talks about character, competence, and commitment. So I will tell you that I think all those things are key ingredients, and I think commitment and compassion and positivity are all part of that. And then, is it a skill that can be learned? Absolutely. And it can be perfected by practice. And I truly believe that. And that's why I think leaders, taking mid-level managers, teaching them how to lead, giving them the opportunities, empowering them, set the banks of the river, entrusting them, enabling them to do the job that you need for them to do is so critical. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the terminology that I have associated with leadership. You know, and then people often say, you know, management and leadership are synonymous. Well, I don't agree. I think leadership and management are different. And I put together a little chart. I've been out in Harvard Business Review. I've been out in a bunch of different articles, and we tried to come up with some, you know, in these different subject areas. I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you look at that, here's some skill sets associated with a leader and some skill sets associated with a manager. Can a manager be a leader? I think they can be. Can a leader be a manager at time? I think they can be. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I do believe there's some traits that belong to leaders. You know, to me, a leader leads people and a manager kind of manages things, but also manages people at times, right? And so I think you can find that there's some, you know, synergistic things between the both. But I like the fact that leaders, you know, they set the vision, and the manager normally achieves the vision, sets the objectives, and figures out how to get them done. And I love the one about energy. You know, a leader brings a passion and a purpose, and a manager brings the control of that and kind of manages it from a control perspective and really from a hierarchical perspective. And again, culture. I think that's an important area and a subject, and I think leadership really has the responsibility of shaping that culture, and managers enact it, implement it. And you know, often we talk about responsibility. You know, what is the responsibility of a manager? And ultimately, they take responsibility for things. They do what is right, and they don't try to avoid conflict, right? Whereas a manager tries to minimize conflict, and they try to minimize risk and avoid conflict. And you know, they want to be right, not necessarily always do what is the right thing. And so these are just some terminologies that, you know, I kind of put together, kind of give you an idea of some of the different aspects. And, you know, the one that is always last for me, but it's important because I'm a very positive person. And I think, you know, personal charisma does matter. I don't think it's the end all, but I do believe charisma, positivity, leading forward, motivating people, incentivizing them, and keeping a positive attitude is critical to leadership. So that's just some common areas that I put together around the differences of leadership and management. You probably have your own, you probably have additional areas, and you probably, you know, might want to even differ with me on some of these here. But to me, these are some basic principles that, you know, I think collectively the majority of people kind of believe in and can rally around. So that's leadership versus management. Kind of gives you a thumbnail sketch. I think we could probably talk about each one of these probably all day, but I just wanted to give you a flavor for some of the characteristics that a leader has versus a manager. And now let's just talk about, you know, leadership styles. People say, is leadership situational? Well, I think leadership can be situational, and I think leadership styles are different. And I would love to cover a couple of these with you because I think it's important. And I think at times when I was early in my career, I didn't always recognize my leadership style, although I know I had one, right? And what were the elements of my style? And did I differ in different occasions? And if I did, why did I differ? And I think this next section of this presentation will talk a little bit about what those nuances of difference are and the fact that leadership can be situational. And I think your style can be situational. So I'm looking forward to share this with you, and I'm going to share a couple different models with you that I think are very important. And like I said, we probably have another session to do another topical area around some of these leadership styles. But I thought it was important to give you a flavor of the different styles and to kind of give you something to think about of what is your leadership style. I kind of categorize myself as my base is really, I believe I'm a servant leader. And I like to support people. I like to enable them. I like to empower them. But can I have a different style? Yeah, I often do. And sometimes I change based upon the dynamics of the situation. So let's just talk about one leadership style. I had the opportunity to view a webinar the other day on Watched Leadership by Marcus Eminato. And, you know, one of the things that he depicts is that we as leaders can be instructors, trainers, coaches, or monitors. And so he uses those four terminologies for different levels of leadership. And each of those are dependent upon the follower's competence. You know, and those competence skills for followers are around skills and the will. So you can see, and I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but if you look at instructor, if you have a follower that has poor skills but has a strong will, then your leadership style is probably going to be one of an instructor. And the amount of direction that you're going to probably have to give them is a lot, and the amount of support is probably not as much because you're going to be doing a lot of the things for them. And then the time and energy you're going to spend is 75%, and the responsibility of the leader is probably 90% responsibility of the leader. So you can see from his model that there are different styles. So if you often wonder why you're changing, it's because you're changing to the competence of your followers. And, you know, I don't know if you ever tried to describe what kind of style you have, whether or not you're a coach, you know, and again, a coach has different skill sets and it applies to competence levels, different competence levels of your followers. As your followers become more competent, but the will becomes more varied, then you might have to be a coach. And you can see what a monitor becomes, really somebody who's just empowering people, giving them the banks of the river, letting them run, giving them most responsibility. So that is one leadership model that I think can probably resonate. And I was trying to look for just a basic model about, you know, why do we use instruction versus training versus coaching versus, you know, potential monitoring. And I thought this was a very good depiction to kind of give us some clarity as to how we have different leadership styles. One of the articles that I had the opportunity to read in the Harvard magazine was by Daniel Goleman, and he talked about leadership that gets results. And in fact, he talked about 6 leadership styles. There's 4 on this page, there's 2 on the next page, and then I added 1. And you probably resonate with a lot of these styles, right? Or have resonated in the fact that you witnessed other people use these kinds of styles, but were never able to put a label on it. Well, today we're going to give these things some label. And I'm not going to make a character judgment whether or not these behaviors or leadership styles are good, bad. I think they are what they are, and they have a fit for different situations. So let's just take the first one, coercive, right? How many times have you seen a manager where it's all stick, no carrot? They want immediate compliance and they say, do what I say, don't give you any any ability to be able to leverage resources, and they take total control. Now, can that leadership style work? Well, it depends. It depends on the environment that you're in. It depends on the situation you're facing. It depends on the, what if there's a crisis in your organization. And if there is a crisis, maybe that style works. Right? So again, I'm not making a judgment whether they're good or bad. I think they all fit for different circumstances. If you try to manage and lead your organization by any one of these solely, I don't know how effective you will be. I think it'll be very hard for you to be effective, especially for the long term. The next style, authoritative style. Come with me approach. And again, I kind of like that one. I think that works. I think the overall goal is stated and you give people the freedom to choose, their own means of achieving these different activities. So you give them some leeway. You set the banks of the river and you give them some opportunity. And again, that may work in certain scenarios. The affiliative style, people come first attitude. It's about harmony. It's about creating morale. It's about empathy. It's about, how do you relate to these people? How do you give advice, counsel? How do you have a good open door policy? And how do you, listen? And, again, that's often a big challenge for most people. I think we often listen with the idea that we want to speak very quickly and we want to be able to add our 2 cents. We don't often listen to really hear what the challenges are. And maybe this style is a little bit more in that approach, and you can really listen to the needs of the individual and the wants of what style that they might and what kind of support that they might need. The democratic style, give workers a voice. The only challenge, and I've been in this environment, not as the direct leader, but as one of the next in command. This is a tough environment. You're giving people the autonomy, giving workers a voice on every opportunity. There is a lot of meetings and there can be a lot of confusion. And you're trying to build consensus, you're trying to build buy-in, and leadership is not always a good thing from a consensus perspective, right? We're going to talk a little bit about leadership skills and what it means to lead, to take responsibility, to be accountable, and to make the hard decisions, right? So that's what a leader does. The two others that were mentioned by Goldman were, this was one on pace setting. The leader sets the standards and exemplifies them, leads by example, expects everybody else to do what he does. And at times people can be overwhelmed by that demand, right? So you got to, I kind of like this one in the sense that I think people emulate the leadership styles they see. So if you think, your actions don't speak loudly, they do. I remember I had a battalion commander and when I was in the military, and I'll tell you what, he did some things that I swore when I took down in my journal that I would never do, and I would never, expose my followers or soldiers or men and women to. And so, you got to figure out where this, type of leadership styles fit for you. Now I'm in a coaching mode. I focus on personal development. I'm focusing on listening and enabling people to be the best they can be. And I do that through strong questioning and things of that nature. But you're already aware of a challenge that the individual may have and a goal for improvement. So you're working around some of these things, and not developmental improvement, but areas of that they either do well and they want to either leverage, or something that they know they need to get a little bit stronger on, want to shore up. The one that comes to resonates for me. So those six, and I'm sure there are many more if you read the literature, but those six were defined by Golden, and it's in my citation. So if you want to read up on it, he does a wonderful job of explaining it, and he does a wonderful job of explaining of how these leadership styles impact all the elements of culture, right? And they did an experiment with a number of employees, and they did a correlation to how effective each leadership style was to the overall impact on climate. Such things as what did these styles do to impact flexibility, responsibility, rewards, commitment, and they actually measured those coefficients, and they were actually able to come up with really differentiate these styles in this environment. So I think it's well worth the read. I think it would give you something very good to be able to share with your management team, and to be able to kind of document for them, the different leadership styles, and more importantly, to test them about, what do you think your leadership style is, and then give them some feedback and try to explain to them where you think their feedback style really is. And to me, this really stems around emotional intelligence. Your style really depends on your ability and your personal ability to manage yourself and your own relationships and be aware of who you are. And that's why these leadership styles are so important. It's one thing to be a leader, but it's one thing you need to understand what is your style and the impact of that style. And that comes around self-management, self-awareness, and then also social awareness and some social skills. And that really is about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence drives your leadership style. And that was pointed out in Daniel Goleman's article, which I commend you to go read. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to learn a little bit of about leadership styles. And again, I'll tell you what, it wasn't until probably a midterm of my career that I really even spent any time trying to decipher my own leadership style, who I was my leadership style situational, did I change? And of course I did. I just never had a term for it, and I never could define it in a way that was meaningful to me and that I could measure day in and day out. So hopefully this is helpful for you all and can kind of give you an idea on leadership styles. Okay, so that's leadership styles. Now, having said all that, I mentioned earlier on that I had a company for about 12 years, and we prided ourselves on the fact that we had strong values, we had a strong culture, we had a strong leadership styles. It was all about empowering people to be the best they can be. And so I'm going to share with you 12 lessons learned that I thought were extremely important. And if you don't mind, if you just bear with me, I'm going to maybe be redundant in some of these because some of these tie into leadership styles. But I'm going to go through 12 of these, and I think they're really important. I think the first one, as you know, I'm not going to read them to you, but to me, your brand, your ethics, your integrity has to be above reproach. I think it ties into not only your own personal brand and reputation, but the brand and reputation of your unit, your company, your corporation. And to me, you have to guard your brand and your reputation with a strong ethic and integrity. There's no doubt in my mind. You know, it only takes one failure or one, as they would say, you fail. It takes a lot to repair some of these things that are ethical lapses, and you can't afford to have any. You got to be on top of your game, not only for yourself, but for your employees, and you got to make sure you live the behavior. And you can't be afraid to correct people. That's a firm part of all this. And I think if you create the right culture, you're going to enable people to understand that feedback is positive. And if you can build that kind of culture, then I think you can give the people the feedback they need to make sure that, you know what, they're going to try to do the right things. And they're not always going to do the right thing, but it's up to us as leaders to identify the behavior when it happens and correct the behavior and give the individual an opportunity to improve. The second one, this is key for all the leaders, vision, right? How do you set the vision? Where are you going? What are you doing? How are you going to get there? I don't know how far down that line you need to explain to employees and subordinates and followers, but I truly believe if you set the vision, have the right team, create the right culture, and empower people to deliver for you, they will. They will get energized and they will achieve those kinds of goals. It's not easy getting there. It takes time. And I will be honest with you that our vision, we set the vision, we shared with our employees, and we said, you know what, if our environment, our culture is not for you, then and you do not want to be a part of this, that is fine, and I will help you find your next engagement. It was not adversarial. It was like, sometimes cultures of organizations don't resonate with people. And our culture at that time was, we're going to do our job. We're going to do the best of our ability. We're going to deliver. We're going to be involved in the community. We're going to give back. We're going to take care of veterans. And you know what? We're going to empower people to be the best they can be. And we were going to be very aggressive in that approach. And so as you build your culture, just make sure you bring your followers and your employees along with you, because they have to grow with you as well. Number 3, be decisive. I will tell you that, employees and people and followers, they expect leaders to make decisions. That's what leaders do. And I will tell you that it's not always easy, and it's not always clear what decision that needs to be made, but sometimes you have to make a decision. Having people wait around for you to make decisions sometimes can be the worst thing you can possibly do. So I will tell you, those 3 were very important to me. I listed them first because I thought they were probably the most important, but they're all important. In this quote from Winston Churchill, I love it. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. I will share with you. Sometimes I don't know if I want to say I have a big ego, but I don't like to fail. And I don't like for somebody to tell me I failed, but I do accept feedback. When I do hear that, I kind of listen, and it resonates with me now. That, at first it was something that said, you know what, I always thought that as the CEO of the company that, I was always right. And the more I found out, the more people I asked questions about, the more I learned that I wasn't, right? And so, listening to people, giving them the opportunity to voice their opinion and those kinds of things, and to be able to communicate with them in a way that's meaningful, which is item number 4, is very powerful, right? And then the other one that's part of this, it's not only communicate where you're going, but communicate the successes. In the business that we're in government contracting, it is hard. There's no doubt about it. Everyone believes it's a hockey stick up and to the right, and they don't realize that it doesn't just go that way. It goes 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, you go sideways, and ultimately you do move it up and to the right, but it's hard and it takes time. And I think, understanding how to communicate this and then celebrating when you have the opportunity, because it doesn't come as frequently as some of the downsides do. and people like to celebrate. They like to feel like they're appreciated. And so therefore, I think, celebration is key. And the other one is just, how do you be humble in the celebration, right? It's like I often tell people that, it's one thing to win. It's, you don't want to brag about it. You can be humble about it. You like to win. Everybody likes a winner, right? But I will tell you that I think humility also becomes part of that. Number 5, be visible and approachable, right? If you're going to lead, that's a responsibility of a leader, is to be able to take new ideas, take constructive criticism, and recognize, to my earlier point, that you are not always right. How many times have you gotten a room where you came in and you thought you had the answer and you were ready to tell everybody how to go do it, what to do, and then somebody came in and said, you know what, let's brainstorm this, and all of a sudden you have 3 different ideas. And matter of fact, the one idea that you walked away with ended up being better than the one you walked in with. So to me, it's about how do you become approachable enough so that you can listen and you can hear what people are saying. So that's very important. Item number 6, surround yourself with smart, intelligent people smarter than you. It's okay to have people smarter than you. You got to figure out how to leverage that talent and to build the team. That's the key, right? How do you build that team around you so that you can benefit from that talent? I always found my COO and we always found that, anytime somebody came to our door that was a quality person that we thought could be a real strong component of our team, even if we didn't find a natural fit, we actually sometimes took the risk of bringing the person on board, right? Because, we wanted to surround ourselves with people that were innovative, creative, that were smarter than us. And sometimes you have to take those chances and you have to listen to those people. There's no sense in bringing them on if you're not going to listen to them, right? So that's the benefit of having those smart people around you. Create the culture and climate, and again, it's up and down the chain. You can't be afraid to communicate. You got to take that feedback. And we talked enough about the culture and the climate, but to me, that's key to your organization. And as you look at organizations, even teaming partners, JVs, mentor proteges, other small businesses, subprime, are these the kinds of organizations that you want to do business with? And you can often tell by their culture, right? And you got to realize what culture they have and what climate they set on a daily basis, and whether or not that's the kind of organization that you want to align yourself and your organization with. Number 8, have passion, compassion, and exude positivity. I will tell you that I think, you got to be passionate about what you do. You got to be positive about what you do. I think that's infectious. I truly believe that. And I also think the opposite is infection. So, to me, if I'm going to lead, you got to lead from a position of positivity with some passion. You got to empower people, motivate them, inspire them, lead them, be passionate about what you do. If you're not passionate about what you do, then maybe you're not doing the things that in the right areas that you need to be doing them in, or you're not leveraging the right skills that you were endowed with to go do. So think about what motivates you, what's your passion and your purpose. And it's okay as a leader to have compassion, it is, and to deal with emotions. I think all those are very legitimate for a leader. Number 9, be prudent. You're not always going to get 100% of the information to make decisions. I often tell managers, if you got 80%, that would be outstanding. If you get 70, sometimes you got to execute. You got to move forward, but you can't do reckless. You still got to do your analysis. You still got to figure out the risk, the impacts, what's plan B, but you got to be prepared to act. Again, delaying can be more detrimental than not acting. So, or waiting for all the information. So be prepared to make decisions. That's what leaders do. And be comfortable with change. We are in a world of change. If you're not adaptable to deal with change, I find is that I'm in this chapter of my life. Change is hard sometimes, right? I'm pretty set in my ways in certain areas, and when a new idea, a new approach comes up, I'm a little resistant, but the more I listen to it, the more I understand it, the more adaptable I become, and it allows me to become, more comfortable with that change. So again, I challenge you to think through some of these things and figure out, how do they apply to you? Where are you? And then the number 11 is, leadership is not about friendship. Leadership can be lonely, and your job is to lead and not be liked. To me, it takes courage at the end of the day. I will tell you that it does take courage. And sometimes, you make some decisions and they're not always right, and you got to recover from those and learn from them. But you got to have the courage to act, and you got to be prepared to act singularly at times. 12, lifelong learning. I will tell you, Earl, get ready to execute the video here. About lifelong learning. I'm on a journey. I would love to tell you I'm an expert in leadership, but I'm not. I'm a student. I've been a student for the last 41 years. Maybe I'm a slow learner, but I tell you what, I love to read on leadership. I love to read on ethics. I love to read around business, and I love to understand what's changing, what's the new environment, and to be able to engage in people and younger folks in different aspects of leadership. So the one video that I want to share with you that I think is something that you should ask yourself. And again, when you go through this video, I think you're going to be inspired. It's 6 minutes. Just be patient with me. I think you'll enjoy the video. It does some role play in the beginning, but it really, as you go through it, Joe Gerstant is the one who put this thing together, and he asks you 3 questions. And so with that, it's really all about, even, as this photo depicts, it's about your why. So Earl, can you play the video for us, please?
Okay. Give me a minute here.
First thing I do on Monday morning, I grab the biggest pot of coffee and I take it to my desk, the whole thing. There are other pots of coffee in the office, but this one's mine.
What's the first thing I do Monday? Well, I'll tell you what I did Saturday night. I go to this barbecue. This guy has the best wings ever. I swear to you, every time I go there, I eat 1,000 of these things. Yeah, I hit the gym, so I'm at my desk 20 minutes early. It's quiet, so it's easy to jump right into work. Besides, you never know when the bosses are watching.
I don't know. It changes. Whatever I feel like that day.
And I bring a buddy along. First time he's ever had them, and he's just, man, he loves them. They're spicy. They're so hot. He's got a graveyard of chicken bones next to him. He starts sweating profusely from the spice, takes his hand, wipes his brow, gets the spice right in his eye.
I hang out in the break room. It's great to talk to everybody about what's going on in the world. And yes, there's a water cooler there.
His eyes start watering. He's crying. He's got snot coming out. It's like he's been pepper sprayed. I'm laughing at him. He's looking for. He's like, what do I do? What do I do?
I usually just come in and start looking at my projects. Nothing special.
So I help him out. I do him a little favor. He's standing right next to the pool. I give him a little bit of a nudge. You're welcome, my friend. What was the question?
Each of us is put together differently. Each of us is one of a kind. Our genetics and how we were raised, where we come from, how we were educated, our experiences, our relationships, all of these things contribute to forming our unique identities. And while we throw this word around authenticity like it's this neat and simple and easy, this safe and common thing, I don't think that it is. I don't think that it's terribly simple or terribly easy, and I don't think that it's very common, especially in the workplace. I think that authenticity is actually fairly rare in the workplace. And while I'm not saying that any of us are running around deliberately pretending to be someone that we're not, I think that we do have a very real tendency to play it safe, to play small. We keep a lot of stuff to ourselves, valuable stuff, things like our hopes and our aspirations and our fears and our questions and our frustrations. We keep a lot of that stuff to ourselves because it's a little bit easier and safer that way. It's a little bit easier if we're a lot like everyone else, if we fit in with the rest of the folks.
Briefly describe myself. It's kind of tough. Do I have some time to think about it?
Do I really have to?
I'm a real hard worker. I can overcome any challenge that's put in front of me. I'm a team builder.
Briefly, to start with, I'm a pretty blunt person, but I think people need to hear the truth. I'm not that good at thinking before I speak, but it's better than holding back. First and foremost, I'm a single mom to 3 amazing kids. But in addition to that, I'm also very active in local nonprofit organizations and have a lot of passion for social causes and environmental issues.
Well, I'm a Scorpio. I like long walks on the beach, backpacking, horseback riding. No, I'm joking. These are serious questions, and I'm a serious person. Okay, that's not true either.
Authenticity is rooted in awareness. It kind of starts with beginning who you know. So I've got some questions for you to wrestle with. The first question is this: do you know who you are? And I'm not really interested in your name or your title. That's the same thing that you tell everyone else, and it doesn't really give me a lot of information. Who are you? How would you explain yourself to someone that you don't yet know? And don't use your name or your title. Give me the good stuff, the interesting stuff, the unique stuff. The second question is, what are you here for? And I'm not talking about why are you sitting at your desk watching this video, or why are you with the organization that you're with today, but I'm talking about, what are you on this planet for? What have you been sent here for? This is a question about purpose and about calling. If you don't have some real clarity around what that purpose or that calling is, it's not very likely that you're going to deliver on it. And the third question that I would ask you to reflect on is, what is your gift? What is the thing that you have, the thing about you that makes you unique, the thing that you've always had? If you spend some time reflecting on those questions, who are you, what are you here for, and what is your gift, then you've got a good place to start. And you've got the framework for holding yourself accountable. Because then you can turn around and ask yourself, is there any evidence of that? If you wrote down the questions to those answers and went home and read them to your spouse or your neighbor, your friends, or your coworkers, would they know who you were talking about? Have you been living accordingly? Because for most of us, there's a little bit of a gap. We're not quite delivering on the promises that we make. So there's some opportunity for improvement there. This is a good place to kind of start in your journey towards a little bit more authenticity. And if you're someone that aspires to be a leader, you can also start to think about what are the things that you do to invite authenticity in the people around you.
Thanks, Earl.
Friends would walk up to me and just be like, what the f is in your mug? And I would just tell
Okay, welcome back. Earl, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I challenge you all to take those 3 questions and spend some time alone and answer those 3 questions for yourself. I will share with you that last night, my mentor, my role model, my inspiration at the age of 88, Major General Carl McNair, passed away. And I will tell you that answering those 3 questions and understanding in the next chapter of my life what that means to me is really important. And that was clearly somebody who was a role model that lived that day in and day out. He knew his purpose. He was the most generous person you could ever imagine. He was the father of Army aviation, spent 38 years in the military, another 20 years in industry, and just a wonderful human being. Anyway, answer those 3 questions, challenge yourself, stretch yourself. And now let's talk about leadership and ethics. You know what? Enron. Does anybody remember Enron? Here's a couple of headline titles from the IG, from the Veterans Affairs Office. Get this: Physician Partners of America to pay $24 million to settle allegations on unnecessary testing. Second article: Jacksonville man sentenced to federal prison for stealing his twin's identity to obtain veterans benefit. Next article: the VA OIG helped in nationwide coordinating law enforcement action to combat COVID-19 fraud, over 150 million. I tell you what, these are rampant, right? So understanding the power of ethics and what it is, what are your standards of right and wrong? What are the things that society says we should be doing, that your organization says you should be doing in the terms of, these different things that are mentioned here. I came out of the military academy where it says duty, honor, country, and it said a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I make this contention that the black and white issues of lying and cheating, stealing and not stealing, those seem to be pretty easy to distinguish. Although if you just heard those articles, maybe they're not. I think even more challenging dilemmas are the ones that are referenced here. And you can read these and read the book by Rushworth Kidder. It is absolutely fantastic and gives you something to think about, and it gives you some wonderful stories. It talks about justice versus mercy, few versus many, truth versus loyalty. You know, do you have a loyalty to an organization? Do you give somebody up if you're a, you know, a prisoner of war? You know, all these things, short-term versus long-term gains. Those are the hard decisions. Those are the ones that, you know, does the ends justify the means? Is it, you know, the greatest good for the greatest number? What is your philosophy on some of these things? And so you just think about those. I'm not asking you to be a Kant or a Moore or any of those philosophers, but understanding the impact of some of these decisions are important. And I'm not going to go into all the ethical, you know, scenarios and all the different philosophers, but I'm going to treat this at a high level to give you an idea of something that I think you can impact and be aware of. And it's called ethical fading. And it's a process that eliminates or minimizes your ethical implication of a situation, right? And I think it's very important for us to leaders. How did Enron get there, right? How did that travesty happen? It didn't happen overnight. You know, it was sort of like the frog in the boiling water, right? If you drop a frog in the boiling water, he's jumping out. If you put him in the boiling water and then turn up the heat slowly but surely, he's going to boil. So how did Enron turn into that scenario? So how do you reduce these risks of ethical lapses? How do you maintain an open and accountable culture and achieve your mission through personal growth, right? Understanding this in your environment is important. So I'm going to go through 4 ethical fading type of things that you might hear. And they have a name and they have a title. And again, there's in the citations, you can go read all about this. It's wonderful to read and educate yourself. Moral justification. You know what? It increases team morale. That's why we should go do it. I'm doing it for the good of a cause, right? It's how do you somehow morally justify something that is totally wrong? And if you hear that terminology in that way, that's moral justification. Euphemistic language, right? What does that mean? I'd rather, you know, borrow it. We're only borrowing. We're not stealing. You know, it's you know, we're right sizing the organization. We're not laying anyone off. You know, we're going to fudge a little bit. Nah, we're not really lying. It's just fudging. So those are just 2 examples. Here's 2 others. Distortion of the consequences. So if the consequence isn't that great, it's okay. Even though it's stealing, but you know what? The company can afford it. You know, it was Lockheed Martin, it's Siemens Corporation, it's, you know, a large company. You know what? They'll never feel it in their pocketbook. So it's okay. How does this stuff manifest itself in your organizations? You know, and the 4th one, displacement of responsibility. You know what? I'll blame everybody else but myself. You know, I don't take responsibility. You know what? My manager told me to do it. Well, did you know it was right or wrong? Yes, I did. But my manager told me to do it and it made it right. Right? So those are, and then there's many more of these, right? So I challenge you to go read the article. I just wanted to give you a flavor for this. This is how Enron happens. It's through ethical fading. It's things like this that we observe over time. We don't bother to correct because we don't think it's a big deal. In some cases we do. I'm generalizing here, I apologize. But in some cases we allow it to happen because we don't want confrontation. We don't want to confront somebody and correct the behavior. So I challenge you. And so that was the ethical fading. How do you avoid it? Here's a couple ideas. How do you educate people about these kinds of things in the workplace? You know, how do you incorporate this into decision making? How do you teach your people? That's item number 1. Identify pressures. Sometimes we as leaders put so much pressure on individuals because we ask them to compete and do so many different things that we're not aware of the impact to culture, to ethics, and to other things. So sometimes we as leaders can cause this to happen because we apply so much pressure. And so how do you avoid, you know, how do you avoid that? Well, you take maybe some outside perspectives. You bring in a third party, you bring in different stakeholders to look at some of the things you're doing and to do assessments. And then the last but not least you know, for today, there's many more. You go read the article. I just picked 4. But how do you hold each other accountable? You know, one of the things we teach at the Leadership and Ethics Conference for high school juniors is when you see a behavior that you do not like or do not think is right, you don't fight with the person. You don't, you know, what do? You know, one of the things we thought of, we just said that you just confront them by saying, you know, that's not okay, and open up a dialogue and a discussion about why it's not okay. but it's our responsibility as leaders to manage all of that as we think about our environment. If we definitely want to have a culture where people are respected and people are doing the right thing, and doing the right thing without leadership in their face, right? I mean, to me, it's what do you do when no one's around? My mother always used to say, somebody's always watching you. So, you know, and it was always, you know, what are you doing when nobody's watching? That's the true test of character. That's the true test of, you know, all the different values that we bring to the table. So I wanted to emphasize this because I think some of the things that we see, I think, you know, we don't know what to call them. We don't know how to deal with them. And sometimes we're a little bit challenged of what it means and how do we deal with them. So I wanted to give you these things. There's references in the citations. You can see the subscripts there or superscripts, and you can go to the citations at the end of this document to give you some more clarity about what they are and what they mean. Okay. I know we covered a lot of ground today. I apologize, but I think these concepts, these thoughts, were more meant to give you, you know, to stimulate your thought process about how you lead, what's your style, what's your gift, what's your purpose on life. I mean, think about those things and challenge your employees to think about these things, to be better human beings, to be better individuals, to be better corporate citizens. You know, one of the things we always valued in our organization was community involvement, whether it's working with Easter SEALs, NDSBC, veterans, mental health, children, adults with disabilities. You know, we always challenged and made that part of who we were as an organization. So that's one of the things that I challenge each of you to try to figure out how to incorporate into what you do as an organization. So I want to leave you with a couple key thoughts. You know, when it comes to leadership and ethics, I cherish the opportunity to lead. I respect the opportunity to lead, the authority it provides me, the ability it gives me, the bandwidth it does, and the flexibility to be able to work with fellow employees to become better corporate citizens and better individuals. So to me, as a leader, you got to lead by example. You know, I think we see day in and day out, it doesn't matter whether or not, you know, you're in politics, you're in government, you're in business, you're in the military. People value what they see. And if you say one thing and do something else, people catch that. Demonstrate personal accountability. You know, accountability, you know, you got to be responsible. You know, Afghanistan, the way that we evacuated Afghanistan, you know, I think there's got to be personal accountability there, and I'm not sure where it was. You know, in my corporation, you know, there's things that happen. Some of them are not good. We take accountability. I know sometimes my program managers made commitments on the behalf of my company, and I counseled them on, you know, how they did that, why they did that, but we delivered on those things that made sense and we could deliver on for them the best we could, right? We always tried to make sure we took accountability for the actions of our employees. That was our responsibility. The decisions you make do matter. You know, so think about those decisions. Really think through them. You're not going to get 100% information though, right? And you got to act quickly, as we talked about. Learn from your failures and mistakes and share those lessons. You know, I'm working right now, we're doing some consulting, and every time we go on engagement, you know, we had an objective, we come out of that engagement, we figure out that we hit it. If we didn't, what do we need to do better? How do we incorporate that into the next presentation? And then, you know, and how do we get better at that? And last but not least is how do you create that safe environment for people to communicate and to talk to you and to have that kind of open dialogue, share ideas? You know, I think that's powerful. And then my quote, that you saw quotes throughout this thing, hopefully you leverage those. A meaningful life is where your talents and your passions collide with the needs of others, right? So to me, find what your passion is, find what your purpose is, and go do that and deliver that and make sure that's part of who you are. You will thrive in those kinds of environments. So having said that, citations, so I have 2 pages of citations just so I can give recognition to where it belongs. I think I captured everybody. So I have 2 pages, and then I also have a page of resources that I think are invaluable. I think some of them are really, like Amp It Up is a good read. So is John, you know, a lot of these are good reads, and they're very good books and they're very educational. So I challenge you to do that. Now, Earl, I think we have time. Can I open it up to questions?
Yes, you can open up the questions, and we do have one from Ken. He asked, can you expand on the primary differences between being a leader versus a manager?
Yeah, so to me, I think I would definitely, if I had the opportunity to differentiate, I think that one chart that we talked about that kind of gives you a different set of skills that are associated with leaders versus managers. You know, like the leader sets the vision, the manager kind of is the implementer of that vision. The leader has followers, the manager has subordinates. I think the leader has personal charisma, you know, and they're not all mutually exclusive, right? So sometimes managers can have both of these. But I think for the most part, you're going to find the leader can, you know, discern things a little bit differently than a manager does. So I would ask you to go back to look at chart 11, and then I would also ask you to look at the leadership styles, right? Leaders can kind of walk across some of these styles where I'm not sure managers can, right? So it's how do you exercise, you know, you deal with different situations in different ways, in my mind, as a leader. But I truly believe your leadership style, you have one that you like the most. There's no doubt in my mind, and you leverage the most. And then you got to understand what that one is, and then figure out, is that the right one for you? And is that the right way you want to be seen in the organization? So hopefully, Ken, that answers your question. But, you know, again, this is, you know, leadership is hard. Leadership and management can be synonymous at times, but I don't believe they're, you know, in some of the skill sets are synonymous. I shouldn't say the total functions are, because sometimes a manager can do some leadership type skills and vice versa. But I think a leader is pretty consistent about delivering those kinds of aspects required of a leader trait.
Again, I'd like to remind everybody that a copy of the slides and a copy of this webinar will be sent to everybody this Friday. So you go over, you don't have to take notes, but we go over this slide presentation and recording and send Phil your questions if you have any questions after this webinar.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to answer any too, Earl. So is there any other questions, Earl?
No, that was one question. I'm gonna give people 3 or 4 minutes.
Wait. Before you do that, let me throw out one challenge. One thing I did mention in the presentation. Try to figure out what your leadership styles are and when you leverage them, and then make sure you go back to Joe's 3 questions. Do you know who you are? What are you here for? What is your gift? And my challenge to you, one of the best awards I ever got was this one from Gordon Bernhardt. And what I would tell you, that it was a wonderful presentation. And it's 2 Indians climbing a mountain. And the saying goes, grab hold and take this hand that reaches out to you. Look up into my eyes. My spirit cries out to you. Friendship is my thought. Let us climb the jagged cliffs of life and fight the ascent of opposition together. If I can lift you today, you will look back and grab the hands of 1,000 more. That is the way the Great Spirit would have it, and it's by a Native American poet. So my challenge to you is give back to others. Figure out how to uplift others. I don't care where you are and what station of your life. Figure out, make it a commitment to help other people throughout your journey in life. And I wish you all nothing but success. And if there's anything I could do to support you, I look forward to seeing you at VETS'22 and at the various dinners that MVC puts on. So thank you all. I appreciate your patience, your attention. And Earl, thank you for helping me navigate this today. You're wonderful.
No problem. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I will, again, just like Phil mentioned, we will see you hopefully at VETS'22 in 2 weeks. So it's still time to register and enjoy us for a good time. So again, thank you, Phil, for all the great information you gave us, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to teach us about leadership.
Thanks, Earl.
All right. Okay, and Ellen said thank you as well. One of our attendees. Okay, well, that's it. It's 4:02. I know everybody's busy. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you for our next Charlie Mike webinar series. Thank you all.